Hello folks, thanks for stopping by and checking out the channel. Please show the channel your love, give me a big thumbs up, also hit the subscribe button. It really does help so I can continue to bring you new episodes and new reports on the American Civil War. And I'm very happy to say that today, going back into the Shenandoah Valley, I got to tell you, I really love the Shenandoah Valley. Beautiful, it's so beautiful, beautiful. I'll tell you, if I did not love Gettysburg and the area around Gettysburg so much, which is where I live now, I would definitely be looking for a house here in the Shenandoah. You know, a house where I could open up the front door or the back door or both and see a beautiful mountain and be so close to so much Civil War history. Hello and welcome back to my channel, Civil War Reports. I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak. And when we last left off on this series, we looked at the North's plan for what would ultimately be the Battle of New Market, fought on May 15th, 1864. And when we last left off, General Siegel, who commanded the Union forces for the New Market campaign, arrived in Martinsburg, Virginia. Well, at the time then, and is still today, Martinsburg, West Virginia. After staging a grand review in Martinsburg, which, well, didn't go as Siegel would have wanted. He was disappointed with the review. The troops were disappointed with him. It really did not set the stage for the makings of a grand campaign. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, Siegel was not really respected for his military ability either by General-in-Chief, Lieutenant General Ulysses S. Grant, or by the President, Abraham Lincoln. But nevertheless, he sets his army in motion. And again, the plan was to march up the Shenandoah Valley and remove any sort of military presence, any sort of southern threat there, and then turn east, march on Richmond, and threaten Lee from the west, basically Lee's left flank. That was the plan. So they begin to march up the Shenandoah Valley. Now, I just want to repeat what I mentioned earlier in the previous episode, that usually when we think of going from north to south, we say, well, we're going down south, and when you're in the south and you're going to head north, you say, well, we're going to head north, we're going to go up to the north. Shenandoah Valley is opposite. Because the further south you go in the Shenandoah Valley, the higher in elevation you go. It's called going up the valley when you head south, and because you go down in elevation as you head towards the Potomac River, it's called going down the valley as you head north. I forgot to mention this in the previous episode. The two main sources I am using for this episode is the Battle of New Market by William C. Davis and the New Market Campaign. Those two books are the main sources for the previous episode, this episode, and any episode that I'm going to be doing, or episodes on the Battle of New Market itself. And again, I'm going to be doing a separate episode just on the VMI Cadets, because their story is so great and so important to the Battle of New Market, they deserve their own episode, which was really the first stop of Siegel's army as he was heading up the valley. And if he thought he was moving his army undetected, he could not have been further from the truth. This region, northern western part of Virginia, Maryland, was really under the control of, or under the watchful eye of, Colonel Mosby and his partisan Rangers, to the point where this region had the unofficial name as being Mosby's Confederacy. So Sickles is advancing up the valley, and he thinks he's really moving undetected. Confederates don't know what he's doing. Mosby and his partisan rangers were doing everything they could to disrupt Siegel's lines of communication, wreaking havoc in the rear, trying to slow them down as best they could. Also, General John Imboden, he was in charge of the cavalry for which would ultimately be the Newmarket campaign, and he also was keeping a very watchful eye on Siegel and his movements. He also was harassing Siegel, slowing him down as best he could in an effort to buy time for General Breckinridge to assemble a force to meet Siegel's threat. Now, who was General John Imboden? Well, he's kind of an obscure cavalryman in Civil War history. While he will claim that he was in 67 different engagements during the war, he really only participated in 3 major campaigns. First one being First Manassas, or First Bull Run to my northern viewers. He was also part of the Gettysburg campaign, where he really didn't play any major role in terms of fighting. During the battle, he was up in Chambersburg guarding supply wagons, but General Lee did put him in charge of the 17-mile-long ambulance train that was carrying wounded back to Virginia. He also carried General Lee's first preliminary after-action report, deliberately kept vague just in case it fell into enemy hands. But Imboden was put in charge of that as well, and see to it that it got to President Jefferson Davis, as quickly as possible. And finally, the Newmarket campaign, where he really does shine. If there was ever a time when the South needed the cavalry to shine, it was at the Newmarket campaign. I'm now in Staunton, Virginia. I was informed earlier by a local resident that the correct pronunciation is Stanton, not Staunton as it's spelled, but Staunton, Virginia. So that's been cleared up. This Yankee boy can now pronounce the town name correctly. So as I mentioned, Staunton, Virginia was very, very important to the Confederacy. There was a major east-west railroad that ran through the city, and if the Yankees were able to capture that railroad, they could literally sever the connection that connected Richmond to the western part of the Confederacy. So holding this city was very, very important. Also, there was major supplies kept here for the Confederate war effort, and also this was a site for a number of Confederate hospitals to take care of the Confederate wounded. So it was very, very vital that Siegel's advancing army not capture this city. On May 2nd, General Imboden, who was camped around this area, broke camp and started heading down the valley to meet Siegel's army. Also on that same day, they sent word down to VMI, notifying them to have the cadets ready to march on a moment's notice. Now, nobody wanted to use the VMI cadets because they were young boys, teenagers. And there's going to be, like I said, a whole separate episode just on the VMI cadets. But they thought maybe they would just be there to be in reserve, to guard wagons, supplies, but not to actually see real combat. But again, that's for a whole separate episode. Now, as I mentioned in part 1 of this episode, Siegel's attack was going to be a 2-prong effort, with him coming up the valley from Winchester, and he also sent a force down the western side of the Allegheny Mountains to come up from Staunton from the rear. Let's take a look at what happened to those Union troops. At the start of the Newmarket campaign, General John Breckinridge put his headquarters, he had it established in Dublin, Virginia. And as I mentioned, there was a force that was coming down western Virginia, and they were going to try to capture Stanton from the south. Well, what ended up happening? They were under the command of General Crook, and thank you very much. Getting a thumbs up from a local here. Nah, that's quite all right. I love it. Thank you. Got a thumbs up from a local here. It's great. That's great. Anyway, General Crook, well, he fought a small engagement with some of Breckinridge's Confederates at the Battle of Cloyd's Mountain. I hope I pronounced that right. Cloyds at New River. Small engagement, but the Yankees were successful. He continued on. General Crook continued on, and he fought another battle in Dublin, and he captured a large amount of Confederate supplies there, destroying supplies, capturing some, and that too was another Yankee victory. Now, for some reason, and I don't know why, I haven't been able to figure this one out, instead of continuing on to Stanton, Crook turned around and basically went back home. Breckinridge was hurting for men. He would be outnumbered at the Battle of Newmarket, but for some reason, Crook, maybe he thought the Confederate force was too strong here at Stanton. Not 100% sure, but he does not continue on with his mission, and Siegel is left alone to face Breckinridge's army here in the Shenandoah Valley. Breckinridge's army was probably about 2/3 the size of Siegel's. But Breckinridge did have one advantage. His cavalry was actually slightly numerically superior than what Siegel's had. And remember from the first episode I did, Siegel's didn't really think very highly of his own cavalry. And Imboden very, very skillfully kept the Yankees in check and fought a series of minor skirmishes as Siegel's advanced up the valley towards Newmarket. And Imboden really does not get the credit he deserves for his actions here during the Newmarket campaign. But he used his cavalry very, very effectively as the Union Army was advancing. Just to give you an example of how well Imboden handled his 1,600 troopers, on May 14th, the day before the Battle of Newmarket, Imboden engages parts of Siegel's army, and he gathers enough information to know that Siegel has split his force. And as a result, Imboden gets word back to Breckinridge that the enemy has split his force. They're apart by about 19 miles. And there's a real opportunity for the Confederates to attack on the 15th and be pretty sure of a successful victory. One thing I do want to point out, and this is sometimes overlooked, but it's very important, the weather was not cooperating for either army. It had been raining for several days. When the VMI Cadets left, they marched off in the rain. In fact, the Battle of Newmarket would be fought in the rain. That's why you have the field of lost shoes, which we'll discuss when we look at the VMI Cadets. It was really not favorable weather, but maybe in a way that worked to the Confederate advantage. On May 13th, General Breckinridge advanced his army to Mount Crawford, about 35 miles north of Stanton, Virginia. And on the 14th, he advanced his army to Lacey Springs, and that's where they halted on May 14th. That same day, May 14th, General Imboden's cavalry engages advanced elements of Siegel's army right here in Newmarket, Virginia, which is where I'm standing. And as a result of that engagement, Imboden realized that there was going to be a battle tomorrow, and it's going to happen here at Newmarket. He sends word back to General Breckinridge, who puts his army in motion again that same day and marches them to Shirley's Hill, about a mile south of Newmarket, and he establishes his headquarters there. They all know there's going to be a fight the next day. General Breckinridge has assembled as many men as he possibly can, including the VMI Cadets, who Breckinridge was really hoping that he could just leave in reserve to guard supply wagons. But fate is going to intervene, and the VMI Cadets on May 15th are going to march into battle, and they're going to make history, fighting alongside, sharing equal danger with their fellow comrades in gray. The night before the battle, General Breckinridge established his headquarters on Shirley's Hill, which you can see off in the distance. It would be from there that he would advance his troops on the morning of May 15th and engage General Siegel in the Battle of Newmarket. The stage was set. Confederates were up there on Shirley's Hill. General Breckinridge was outnumbered, and he pretty much had every available man that he could find at his disposal, including the VMI Cadets. General Lee could not spare any troops to send him, as he was engaged and had his hands full dealing with General Grant. If the Confederates ever needed a victory to secure the breadbasket of the Confederacy and to protect the vital supplies in Staunton, Virginia, they needed it on May 15th. Breckinridge knew he was outnumbered, and I don't know what his mindset was. Maybe he didn't think they could pull off a victory, but of course he was a soldier and he was going to do his duty to the best of his ability. The Confederates needed a victory, and the next day they got what they desperately needed. What would ultimately be the last major Confederate victory in the Shenandoah Valley occurred the following day, May 15th, 1864. Exactly 1 year to the day that General Stonewall Jackson, his earthly remains committed to the ground. I truly believe Stonewall on that day was overseeing this battle and brought the Confederates one more victory in the Shenandoah. So the next time we get together on this topic, we will look at the battle itself. I'll take you on the battlefield, show you all the important places of it. But for now, I just want to say, for Civil War Reports, I am your War of the Rebellion reporter, Brian Thomas Kopak. Thank you very, very much for watching. Until next time. And if you like what you saw today, please hit the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up. Also, notify your friends. Let them know about this channel and ask them to subscribe as well. If you like, you may leave a question or a comment below, and perhaps I will answer your question in a future episode of Civil War Reports. Until next time, please keep the history alive.